Hello everybody, I'm Dan Murrell here with a look at the last 4 months of the year. At the beginning of every year, I always do a preview of what's coming up in theaters and sometimes on streaming, but it always gets a little dicey towards the end of the year because there's stuff that's added to the schedule or that we don't even know is coming out yet. So as we get to the end of the summer season, I wanted to look at this last part of the year and go a little bit deeper into what you're going to be able to see, some of the big movies, some things that I flagged that I think might be interesting, and some stuff that may have just slipped under your radar. This is not everything that's coming out. There may be a thing or two that you're interested in that didn't make my list. And as always, release dates are subject to change. But let's look at September through the end of the year at what's coming out in theaters and on streaming and what you might be spending the last part of your year enjoying. And let's start with next weekend, September 6th, the long-awaited sequel to Beetlejuice called Beetlejuice. Oh, I just said it 3 times. Hits theaters. Michael Keaton, Winona Ryder, and Catherine O'Hara return, with Jenna Ortega joining as Lydia Dietz's daughter in Tim Burton's follow-up to 1988's classic. This movie's 36 years after the original, and long-delayed sequels to well-regarded films have a very spotty history, but I am curious to see what this movie has in store, and you will see my review of Beetlejuice right here on the channel next week. Also coming out next Friday is a movie called The Front Room, which is written and directed by Max and Sam Eggers, twin brothers and younger brothers of Robert Eggers. Brandy stars as a pregnant woman who's forced to care for her husband's difficult elderly mother. This looks like it's going to hit on all kinds of different themes like race and religion with some psychological horror thrown in. The combination of the Eggers involvement, and they've collaborated with Robert Eggers on some of his films, and A24 being the distributor, has me intrigued by this movie. Finally, next Friday, September 6th, is the release of Rebel Ridge on Netflix. This is the latest film from writer-director Jeremy Saulnier, who's made some great twisted movies like Blue Ruin and Green Room, especially. I love that movie. Aaron Pierre stars as a man whose money is seized by a corrupt police chief played by Don Johnson. He then decides to fight back and take what's his. John Boyega was originally set to star in this movie and then quit mid-production due to reasons that are still being talked about, and the filming of the movie was delayed by the pandemic. So here's hoping that the rocky road that Rebel Ridge has faced to get into homes around the world is finally at an end. On September 12th, we have another concert movie hitting theaters, Usher, Rendezvous in Paris. In the Post-Eras Tour and Beyoncé surge of concert movies, Usher will be in theaters for a 4-day limited engagement with footage from concerts that he did last year in Paris. Then on Friday, September 13th, hitting theaters is Speak No Evil, a remake of a 2022 film from Denmark that I had a chance to see. The original is twisted more than I can say, and it's hard to see how this one's going to be better than that beyond recreating what the first film already did, but it does have James McAvoy, who plays host to a couple that he and his wife met on vacation. The couple soon realizes that they may be in danger as their host reveals secrets about themselves they didn't previously know. James Watkins, who wrote and directed 2000's Eden Lake, directs this movie, and if it can be 75% as good as the original, then I think that audiences are in for a very squeamish, oftentimes uncomfortable ride. Hitting limited release on September 13th is one of the buzziest movies out of Sundance. It's called My Old Ass, and it's written and directed by Megan Park, whose feature debut as writer-director was the standout 2021 film The Fallout, starring Jenna Ortega. Maisie Stella plays a teenage girl who meets her future self, played by Aubrey Plaza, and tries to avoid the mistakes in her life that she's now been warned about. The movie's producers include Margot Robbie, and critical reaction has been very positive thus far. My Old Ass hits limited release on September 13th, and then a streaming release will follow on Amazon Prime Video. Finally, on September 13th is the 4:30 movie, the latest from writer-director Kevin Smith, who steps away from the world of Jay and Silent Bob into his own life with a semi-autobiographical movie about a bunch of teenagers in the 80s who love going to the movies. As with all of Kevin Smith's latest films, you can expect a somewhat limited theatrical release followed by a nationwide road tour combined with Kevin Smith doing speaking engagements afterwards. On September 18th, Agatha All Along hits Disney+. Following Agatha's banishment at the end of WandaVision, Catherine Hahn's meddlesome neighbor walks the witch's road along with the coven, including Patti LuPone, Deborah Jo Rupp, and a sharp-tongued Aubrey Plaza. She's got a busy month in order to regain her powers. We're almost 4 years and twice as many working titles for this show removed from Agatha's breakout viral moment in 2021, but we'll see what creator Jack Schaefer, who was also the creator of WandaVision, has in store. The 9-episode series will debut its first 2 episodes on September 18th, and then will be a weekly release after that. On September 19th, The Penguin hits Max. I guess DC also wanted in on a streaming series for a franchise villain. So Colin Farrell's Penguin is getting his own show following the events of The Batman as he seeks to fill the void left by Carmine Falcone's death. Kristen Milioti plays Sophia Falcone, daughter of Carmine and competitor to the Penguin. The 8-episode series will debut episodes weekly through early November. On Friday, September 20th, Transformers 1 hits theaters. The Transformers franchise returns to its roots, animation, with this adventure aimed at kids, directed by Josh Cooley, who co-wrote Inside Out and directed Toy Story 4 for Pixar. The script is from a team of writers who have also written multiple movies in the MCU. Transformers 1 is set on Cybertron and traces the early days of Optimus Prime, voiced by Chris Hemsworth, and Megatron, voiced by Brian Tyree Henry. Scarlett Johansson, Keegan-Michael Key, John Hamm, and Steve Buscemi are among the rest of the cast. Early buzz on the movie has been positive, but we've heard that before, and we'll see how a kid-friendly Transformers movie, which is a bit of a throwback, fits into the modern era of this franchise. On September 20th, also hitting theaters, though probably not as widely as Transformers 1, is a movie called A Different Man. Sebastian Stan plays a man with neurofibromatosis, a condition that causes tumor growth, which affects his appearance. He's transformed and healed by modern medicine, but finds himself fixated on the actor playing his former self, who still has the condition. Buzz around the movie out of Sundance was that it is pretty wild, and with A24 attached as both distributor and co-producer, you can expect that it will stray pretty far from the mainstream. Renata Reinsve, who was acclaimed for her performance in The Worst Person in the World, co-stars along with Adam Pearson, who actually has neurofibromatosis and plays the actor that Sebastian Stan becomes obsessed with. Hitting limited release on September 20th is a movie called The Substance from writer-director Coralie Fargeat, whose first film, Revenge, was on my top 10 list back in 2017. Her second film is about an aging fitness star, played by Demi Moore, who's given the option to take a mysterious substance in order to turn her into a younger, better version of herself. Body horror is the term I've heard most frequently associated with The Substance, and if you've seen Revenge, you know that this director is not afraid of using blood and gore. Margaret Qualley co-stars as Moore's alternate self, along with Dennis Quaid, who took on his role after the original actor cast Ray Liotta passed away. The Substance won the Best Screenplay Award at this year's Cannes Film Festival, and if the performance from Demi Moore delivers as advertised, you could see her as part of the Oscar race later this year. Finally, on September 20th is a movie called His Three Daughters, which is hitting Netflix. Speaking of Oscar buzz, the trio of actresses starring in His Three Daughters are gaining a lot of acclaim from people who've seen the movie. Natasha Lyonne, Carrie Coon, and Elizabeth Olsen play three sisters who reunite to care for their dying father. The film will actually have a limited release on September 6th, although Netflix does not release their films very widely. It hits the service on the 20th, and I think that it is very likely that you will see this movie get a big awards season push. On September 21st, you'll be able to see one of my most anticipated movies of the year, Superman, the Christopher Reeve story. Christopher Reeve would have been 72 this year, and on his birthday week, we're getting a release of a documentary about his life and legacy. I've heard great things about this movie. Its theatrical release will be through Fathom Events on September 21st, 22nd, and again on the 25th, although a wider expansion is possible. And it will almost certainly debut on Max, since it's the home of DC and DC Studios has attached its name to it sometime in 2024, and again, this could play into the Oscar race for Best Documentary. On Friday, September 27th, The Wild Robot hits theaters. Chris Sanders, the writer-director behind Lilo and Stitch, How to Train Your Dragon, and The Croods, is also behind this DreamWorks animation movie based on Peter Brown's book. Lupita Nyong'o voices a robot named Roz who has to survive in a forest after being abandoned. Pedro Pascal, Bill Nighy, and Mark Hamill also provide voices. The Wild Robot delayed its release by 1 week to avoid being in direct competition with Transformers 1. Let's see how that works out. On September 27th, we have another big movie, although in much more limited release, Megalopolis, Francis Ford Coppola's mega-budget, self-financed epic, which received mixed reviews at Cannes and has had all sorts of controversy following that. We'll be getting a release of some sort in the US through Lionsgate and Utopia. Coppola reportedly spent $120 million of his own money on this story about an architect named Caesar Catalina, played by Adam Driver, who seeks to rebuild a metropolis that's past its prime into a futuristic utopia Utopian City. The cast also includes Natalie Emmanuel, Aubrey Plaza, there she is again, Giancarlo Esposito, Lawrence Fishburne, and Shia LaBeouf. Good or Bad, Megalopolis is one of my most anticipated movies of the year because I just have to see what it is that Francis Ford Coppola felt so strongly about that he put so much money into it. This is a director who has pursued his art literally at all costs throughout his career, often to his detriment, and we'll see what this latest big investment has in store. Also on September 27th in limited release is a movie called Lee. Ellen Kuras, the cinematographer of movies including Summer of Sam and Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, makes her feature directing debut in this biopic of photographer Lee Miller, who documented combat in World War II. Kate Winslet stars as Lee Miller, and because she's Kate Winslet, may find herself in awards contention. The supporting cast also includes Marion Cotillard, Andrea Riseborough, and Andy Samberg in a dramatic role. There are a couple of movies that are also hitting streaming on Friday, September 27th. One of them is a prequel to Rosemary's Baby called Apartment 7A. Julia Garner stars as a young aspiring dancer who rents an apartment in a very bad building, as we found out in Rosemary's Baby. The movie also stars Diane Wiest and Jim Sturgis. John Krasinski and Michael Bay are among this movie's producers, and it will be released on Paramount Plus and video on demand simultaneously. Also on September 27th is Wolves. John Watts wrote and directed this hitman comedy starring George Clooney and Brad Pitt. It was initially slated for a wide release on September 20th in theaters, but after a string of theatrical disappointments, Apple TV Plus changed strategy, so it will now be released to some limited theaters on September 20th and will hit Apple TV Plus on September 27th. The trailer looks good. I like Clooney and Pitt together, and I'm excited to see Watts direct his first non-Spider-Man film since 2015's Cop Car. I hope that this is not another good movie that's lost in the shuffle of yet another streamer desperately trying to figure out the proper strategy. On Sunday, September 29th, The Walking Dead, Daryl Dixon, The Book of Carol, that's one of the longest TV show names I can think of, hits AMC. Carol makes the intercontinental trip to search for her BFF, Daryl, in the second season of the spin-off to the original show. I lost track of The Walking Dead years ago, but I'm assuming that fans will love seeing these two reunited in France. It's crazy, though, to think about when the show started, how long it would take them to get from just one town to another town in Georgia, and now they're like hopping all over the world and the country. I guess it gets a little bit easier to move the longer you're amongst the living dead. On Friday, October 4th, we've got a big one, Joker, Folie à Deux. Joaquin Phoenix returns to his Oscar-winning role of Arthur Fleck, aka the Joker, with Lady Gaga joining him as Harley Quinn and Todd Phillips returning to direct. The sequel's been described as part musical, and I honestly have no idea what to expect, which means this movie is also on my most anticipated list. I had some issues with the first Joker movie, but I cannot argue with the fact that Joaquin Phoenix's performance in that film was absolutely brilliant. He deserved the Academy Award, and I'm very anxious to see what they have in store for this second go-round. Also hitting theaters on October 4th, I think, is a movie called White Bird. It's a follow-up / spin-off to 2017's Wonder, and it's on this list simply as an historical record and perhaps proof that it could actually be released. It's largely a flashback story featuring a young girl who finds love with the son of the family who hides her family from the Nazis during World War II. Helen Mirren stars as the older woman recounting her life story. White Bird was originally supposed to be released in September 2022 before being pushed to October of that year, then rescheduled to August 2023 before being pushed to late 2023 due to the actor strike, then finally rescheduled to October of this year. White Bird was actually already released in a handful of international markets at the beginning part of this year, and I think that reviews and box office at this point don't matter. I think everybody involved with the movie is just going to be happy that it finally got released here in the US. In limited release on October 4th is a movie called The Outrun. Nora Fingscheit wrote and directed this story of an alcoholic woman fresh out of rehab who returns to her family home in Scotland. The movie debuted at Sundance and immediately began generating Oscar buzz for star Saoirse Ronan. If her performance matches the early hype, then Saoirse Ronan could be somebody that we hear in the Oscar mix at the end of the year. Finally, on October 4th, hitting Netflix is The Platform 2. The Spanish movie The Platform racked up huge numbers on Netflix in 2020, largely due to its release coinciding with the COVID lockdowns. 4 years later, we have a sequel as we return to the Tower prison, The Platform, and we'll see if this sequel can measure up to the performance of the original, or if the lockdown produced a streaming hit that simply can't be replicated. On October 11th, I'm excited about this one. Saturday Night hits theaters. As a certified SNL nerd since I was a kid, I can't wait for this movie, which was directed by Jason Reitman and co-written by Reitman and Gil Kenan. The movie takes place roughly in real time in the 90 minutes leading up to SNL's first show ever back in 1975, and the cast includes too many names to mention. I'm sure it will take creative license and get some things wrong, but I love the show and I love its history, and I can't wait to see how it depicts these early days of SNL before anybody involved knew how legendary that show would become. Also on October 11th, we have Terrifier 3. Damien Leone's Terrifier series has had a fascinating trajectory. The original 2016 film was made for around $50,000, had a very limited release, earning less than $350,000, but achieved a cult following. Terrifier 2 had a bigger budget, around $250,000, and built its box office week over week through word of mouth and expansion, eventually earning nearly $11 million. Now Leone is getting the biggest budget and release of all, with Terrifier 3 reportedly budgeted around $2 million. I have not seen any of these films, but I may have to check them out, if only because it's a great example of how you can build an organic following over time simply through showing your movie and letting the word of mouth spread. In limited release on October 7th is We Live in Time. Brooklyn director John Crowley is helming this movie, starring Andrew Garfield and Florence Pugh as a young couple whose relationship we trace from their first meeting to their first child to a serious health situation. Based off the trailer, it looks like it might be a good idea to bring some tissues to the theater, and with Florence Pugh and Andrew Garfield in the leads, if this movie delivers this kind of movie, then they could also be in the awards talk at the end of the year. Finally, on October 11th, hitting Apple TV Plus is a series called Disclaimer. Alfonso Cuarón wrote and directed this 7-part series for Apple TV Plus based on the novel by Renee Knight. Cate Blanchett stars as a journalist whose dark secret is revealed to the world. The cast also includes Kevin Kline, Sacha Baron Cohen, Cody Smith-McPhee, and Leslie Manville. I haven't read the book. I don't know much about this story, but Alfonso Cuarón at the helm with that cast may actually accomplish the heretofore difficult task of getting me to actually watch something that I've heard is coming on Apple TV Plus. And speaking of Apple TV Plus, on October 16th, Shrinking Season 2 hits the streaming service. To my earlier point, I've heard that Shrinking, starring Jason Segel and Harrison Ford, is really good, but I haven't seen it. And at this point, I have a month's worth of Apple TV shows that I'm told I should check out, so this one will likely also get added to the list. On Friday, October 18th, Smile 2 hits theaters. Writer-director Parker Finn returns for the sequel to the 2022 surprise hit. Naomi Scott stars as Sky Riley, a pop idol who's menaced not by Josh Hartnett, but by mysterious smiling figures after she witnesses a death. This appears to be a shift in style for the sequel, which I don't mind. I did enjoy the first Smile. I think I'll check this one out. The first movie grossed over $200 million worldwide off a $17 million budget after Paramount decided not to release it straight to Paramount Plus and put it in theaters instead. You know, it turns out that this theatrical exhibition model can actually make studios money. Who would have thought? Also hitting theaters nationwide on Friday, October 18th is Flight Risk. Mark Wahlberg stars as a hitman who abducts a government witness, played by Topher Grace, and an FBI agent, played by Michelle Dockery, by posing as a pilot. Eventually, they all have to survive their flight as other hitmen seek to take out the witness and claim the reward for themselves. I don't know if this is going to be any good, but I have to see what it is about Mark Wahlberg's performance that inspired him to go with this horseshoe bald hairdo. It's also funny that the trailer hypes Flight Risk as coming from the director of Braveheart, Apocalypto, and Hacksaw Ridge without naming him. It's Mel Gibson. That would be Mel Gibson. And I think that this is a sign that major studios may still be wary of marketing things around Mel Gibson, aside from the many, many major studio films that he starred in since the mid-2000s. Finally, on October 18th, in limited release is Anora, which comes from writer-director Sean Baker, who brought us The Florida Project and Red Rocket, among other standout films. Anora stars Mikey Madison as a stripper who elopes with the son of a Russian billionaire once his parents find out they are none too happy with their new daughter-in-law and seek to have the marriage terminated. Anora won the top prize, the Palme d'Or, at this year's Cannes Film Festival and is being distributed by Neon, which has had a stellar track record with award season releases in the last few years. Mikey Madison in particular has received rave reviews for her performance, and if you want to be plugged into the 2024 award season circuit, then I think that Anora needs to be near the top of your list. In theaters on Friday, October 25th is Venom: The Last Dance. Tom Hardy is reportedly playing Venom for the final time, at least in his own movie, with the third Venom movie, this time written and directed by Kelly Marcel, who co-wrote the first film, scripted the second film alone, and now is taking on full scripting and directing duties. I horrified lots of people back in 2018 by liking the first Venom movie, and I actually enjoyed the second movie to a lesser degree. I'm just a big fan of Tom Hardy in this role, and I'm looking forward to what he has in store this time as Eddie Brock and Venom go on the run from other symbiotes invading Earth from Venom's home planet. Also on October 25th, hitting Netflix is a documentary called The Remarkable Life of Evelyn, which is the story of Mott Steen, a young man with a degenerative illness who spent much of his time playing World of Warcraft. After his death, his parents were introduced to the second life that they didn't even know their son was leading, and his real influence that reached around the world. I saw this movie at the virtual Sundance Film Festival earlier this year, and I can tell you that it will likely be on my top 10 list at the end of the year. I'm going to give it another watch. It is an incredible documentary, extremely moving, and again, it just goes to show you the effect that one person can have, even in ways that other people don't understand or don't comprehend. I cannot recommend this documentary highly enough. Put it on your to-watch list. We've got a lot more stuff to break down, but before we do, I want to thank the sponsor for this video, Mando. Summer may almost be over, but the heat is still here, and it doesn't care what the calendar says. So if you're out there still trying to squeeze in that last summer trip and sweating like I do, then Mando is a great choice for you. Mando is clinically proven to control odor for 72 hours, and it's safe to use for your whole body. If it's somewhere you sweat, you can use Mando there. The greatest thing about Mando is that it stops odor before it starts, and it's available in 4 cologne quality scents, including my personal favorite, bourbon leather. And the reason you're outside doesn't even matter. Golf? Mando. Pickleball? Mando. Jogging? Mando. Plus it reduces chafing. Running into the theater because the movie's about to start? Also Mando, and you should manage your schedule better. I use Mando every day because I do sweat a lot, and I don't want to worry about whether I'm starting to develop that sweat stink, and I don't have to worry about it because Mando has me covered. Right now, Mando has a special offer. New customers get $5 off Mando's best-selling starter pack with code DAN at shopmando.com. Mando's starter pack is perfect for new customers. It comes with a solid stick deodorant, cream tube deodorant, 2 free products of your choice like a mini body wash and deodorant wipes, and free shipping. And I do have that discount code to help you get hooked on my favorite smelling whole body deodorant on the market. New customers get $5 off a starter pack with our exclusive code. That equates to over 40% off your starter pack. Just use code DAN at shopmando.com. That's shopmando.com. Moving on now to November, at some point in the month, and there have been unofficial reports that the date is November 2nd, we will be getting Arcane League of Legends Season 2. After such a long layoff, I'm sure that there will be some pressure for the show to deliver yet another standout season of television, but the first season was great, so we'll see what they do this time. On Friday, November 1st, Here hits theaters nationwide. Director Robert Zemeckis teams up with his favorite co-star, Technology, for this movie that reunites Zemeckis with Tom Hanks and his Forrest Gump co-star, Robin Wright. Here is set entirely in one room from one angle as we track the entire lives of Hanks and Wright's characters from youth to old age, and it appears we also see the history of the world from this locked-off limited perspective. I'm not a fan of de-aging technology, even when it's not used to revive dead actors, and it looks like Here will be making heavy use of it, but this is a powerhouse team and a potentially touching story, so we'll see if Zemeckis uses the story to guide the technology, which could work, or if this becomes yet another Robert Zemeckis film where technology takes the front seat at the expense of the story. In limited release on November 1st is a movie called My Dead Friend Zoe. There's not a lot out right now about this movie other than the reviews from its debut at South by Southwest, which were very good. Sonequa Martin Green stars as a veteran who's able to talk to her friend Zoe, played by Natalie Morales, who, as you can imagine from the title, is dead. Ed Harris also stars as Green's grandfather, who served in Vietnam. Ed Harris and Sonequa Martin Green have both been praised almost universally for their performances in the film, in reviews that, as I mentioned, have been very positive thus far. So even though I don't know a lot about the movie, I'm going to go ahead and flag it as one that you may want to watch when it hits theaters. Finally, on November 1st, in limited release is a movie called A Real Pain. This is a movie that hit the awards circuit that I can tell you about, starring Jesse Eisenberg and Kieran Culkin, and also written and directed by Jesse Eisenberg. If you recall, I hated Eisenberg's first film, When You Finish Saving the World, but I loved this one. He and Culkin play cousins visiting their family's ancestral home in Poland in honor of their recently deceased grandmother. As the trip goes on, the two reveal their own weaknesses and insecurities, while occasionally making the trip uncomfortable for the others on the tour. Both lead actors are great, but Kieran Culkin in particular puts in one of the best performances of the year. If you're susceptible to cringing and secondhand embarrassment, this might be a tough watch, but this journey with these characters is worth it. Emma Stone is one of the movie's producers, and Searchlight picked up the movie for distribution, so you can expect a big awards season push, and in my opinion, deservedly so. Hitting wide release on November 8th is the movie Conclave, which expands into wide release after 1 week in New York and LA. Conclave comes from director Edward Berger, who received numerous Oscar, BAFTA, and other nominations for All Quiet on the Western Front back in 2022. Ralph Fiennes plays Cardinal Lawrence, who's tasked with running the conclave that will determine who the new pope will be after the former pope's sudden death. Stanley Tucci, John Lithgow, and Isabella Rossellini are among the supporting cast, and this basically looks like a murder mystery / political intrigue movie set in the Vatican, and with this director and this writer and this cast, sign me up. Hitting Netflix on November 13th is a movie called Emilia Perez. Jacques Audiard wrote and directed what's described as a musical crime comedy film that won the jury prize at Cannes, as well as a shared Best Actress prize for the movie's leads, Selena Gomez, Adriana Paz, Carla Sofia Gascon, and Zoe Saldana. Saldana plays a lawyer working to help a trans female cartel leader escape her previous life. In addition to the accolades from Cannes, reviews have been positive so far, and this looks to be another of Netflix's big awards season pushes. On Friday, November 13th, Red 1 hits theaters. It seems like this movie has been coming out forever because filming wrapped in early 2023. J.K. Simmons plays Santa Claus, and Dwayne Johnson plays his head of security, Callum Drift. That is a very Dwayne Johnson character name. When Santa is kidnapped, Callum recruits bounty hunter Jack O'Malley, played by Chris Evans, to help rescue him. Jake Kasdan directs from a screenplay by Fast and the Furious writer Chris Morgan. Honestly, I think this movie could go either way as far as whether it's good or bad, but it's looking to cash in at that box office rush around the holidays, so let's see if this is another shiny gift for The Rock or another turkey. Also hitting theaters on November 13th is Heretic. Heretic comes from A24 and was written and directed by Scott Beck and Brian Woods, who wrote A Quiet Place with John Krasinski and wrote and directed last year's 65. Hugh Grant plays a charming man who traps a pair of young Mormon missionaries in his house, and the film follows their attempts to escape. I'm loving this new career path for Hugh Grant, where he just kind of does whatever he wants, and I'm interested to see him in this type of role. Finally, on November 15th, hitting Netflix is a movie called Back in Action. Back in Action is from director Seth Gordon, whose last film is 2017's Baywatch, and who also directed Four Christmases, Horrible Bosses, and Identity Thief. It's a bit of a spotty record. It also marks the return of Cameron Diaz in her first movie since Annie back in 2014. She plays a former spy who's pushed back into the world of espionage alongside another former spy played by Jamie Foxx after their identities are revealed. Diaz has a few other projects in the pipeline, including Shrek 5, and Jamie Foxx is coming back from a major medical health scare, so it's great to see both of these actors, well, back in action, I guess. On Friday, November 22nd, the Friday before Thanksgiving, Gladiator 2 hits theaters nationwide. Ridley Scott is back in the director's chair for this sequel written by David Scarpa, who also wrote Napoleon. Paul Mescal enters the arena as Roman royalty who's forced to fight as a gladiator when new Emperor Marcus Acacius, played by Pedro Pascal, takes over in Rome. Denzel Washington also appears in the film as Macrinus, Lucius's gladiatorial mentor. I don't revere the original as much as a lot of people do, so I'm interested to see what a sequel may bring. Ridley Scott has been very hit or miss in recent years, but audiences seem primed for a sequel to Gladiator, so if he can deliver, then this could do very well at the box office and perhaps even on the awards circuit. Also on November 22nd is Wicked. Technically, this should be called Wicked Part 1, as it's only half of the planned adaptation, but something tells me the studio doesn't want to tell anyone who doesn't already know that they're not getting the full story. John M. Chu, whose musical adaptation of In the Heights I very much enjoyed, will direct both parts, with Cynthia Erivo playing Elphaba, the future Wicked Witch of the West, and Ariana Grande playing Galinda, who will later become the good witch, Glinda. Michelle Yeoh plays the headmistress of their university, and Jeff Goldblum, Bloom plays the Wizard of Oz. Honestly, I'm going to get a ticket just to see that. I've never seen the stage musical. I've heard it's great, and it seems like this would be a slam dunk based on the popularity of that musical, but I can also tell you that hell hath no fury like a Broadway fan scorns, so if something gets lost in the translation, I wouldn't immediately count this as being bound for success. I mean, I'm still bitter over what I thought was the lackluster adaptation of Les Miserables back in 2012, and that was over a decade ago. You've got some streaming options on Thanksgiving week as well. On November 22nd, Spellbound hits Netflix. Spellbound certainly has some legit animation veterans involved. Director Vicky Jensen co-directed the first Shrek film in 2001, and the movie also features new songs from legendary Disney songwriter Alan Menken. Rachel Zegler voices a young princess named Elian who has to bring her kingdom back together and reunite her parents, voiced by Nicole Kidman and Javier Bardem, who have been transformed into monsters. John Lithgow, Jennifer Lewis, and Nathan Lane also lend voices to the film. Netflix has been looking for some consistent breakouts with their animated movies. They've had some here or there, but maybe by bringing in some animation veterans, they can deliver a film that will help to add to their streaming resume when it comes to feature animation. Finally, on November 22nd, The Piano Lesson hits Netflix. It's the directorial debut of Malcolm Washington, son of Denzel, and stars his father along with Danielle Deadwyler, Samuel L. Jackson, Ray Fisher, and John David Washington. The Piano Lesson tells the story of a black family's history through the generations, with the family piano as a constant. It's adapted from August Wilson's play of the same name, and with that cast, including Deadwyler, who many people was snubbed of an Oscar nomination for Till, and the source material, this may well be on the radar for awards season. The Piano Lesson will spend 2 weeks in limited release prior to its debut on Netflix on November 22nd. As we get into Thanksgiving week, there is one big movie that will be looking to take your Turkey Day dollars, and that's Moana 2. Thanksgiving will belong to Moana as the animated sequel, which nobody really knew about until less than a year ago, hits theaters on the Wednesday before Turkey Day. Moana 2 was originally intended to be a series for Disney Plus until the studio remembered that they like money. Moana sets out to find a mythical island and break a curse on her people with the help, once again, of Dwayne Johnson's Maui. Auli'i Cravalho also returns to the film to voice Moana, though original songwriter Lin-Manuel Miranda is not returning. Stepping in for songwriting duties are viral songwriters Abigail Barlow and Emily Bear. As we head into December, Star Wars is delivering yet another series to Disney Plus. I know, it seems like we just got through the Acolyte discussion. On December 3rd, Star Wars Skeleton Crew hits Disney Plus. Some cynics would say that Star Wars has always been kids stuff, but the latest series is actually aimed at and stars a group of children who set out on a space adventure with the assistance of a Force user named Jadna Nawood, played by Jude Law. The series comes from creators John Watts and Christopher Ford and was inspired by The Goonies and other 80s films. And the directors on board to make episodes include Daniel Kwan and Daniel Scheinert, as well as David Lowery, Lee Isaac Chung, and Bryce Dallas Howard. That's a pretty good lineup. This is an interesting direction for the Star Wars franchise, and I'm sure that it will invoke the fury of many online, which is to be expected at this point. But with the talent involved, I'm actually pretty interested in seeing what this series has in store. Hitting theaters on Friday, December 6th is a movie with one of my favorite titles of the year, Night Bitch. Marielle Heller, who directed Melissa McCarthy and Richard E. Grant to Oscar nominations in Can You Ever Forgive Me, takes on this story of a stay-at-home mom whose life takes an unexpected twist. Amy Adams has been generating buzz for her performance, which means the Oscars are getting ready to snub her in some way, and this was reportedly saved from a streaming release by strong audience scores. Yes, the fact that the Oscars are continually screwing over Amy Adams does make for a good narrative, but can we all agree that it would be kind of hilarious if the movie that Amy Adams finally won her Academy Award for was Night Bitch? Just print that on the plaque right now. Also on December 6th, Y2K hits theaters nationwide. The movie, not some delayed form of the actual Y2K bug. Kyle Mooney, who co-wrote a hidden gem of a movie back in 2017 called Brigsby Bear, makes his directorial debut with this comedy from A24 about a version of New Year's Eve 1999 where the catastrophe that some expected with the Y2K bug actually happened. The movie played South by Southwest and has a huge cast including Jaden Martell, Julian Dennison, Rachel Zegler, Alicia Silverstone, Tim Heidecker, and Fred Durst as himself. You can't have a movie set in 1999 without some of the biscuit. I like Kyle Mooney's humor going back to SNL and the Good Neighbor days, so I'm interested in seeing this, although it is very odd to see more and more actual world events that I lived through as an adult or a near adult being used as nostalgia premises for comedies. That's just surreal. On Friday, December 13th, Middle-earth gets the anime treatment in The Lord of the Rings, The War of the Rohirrim from director Kenji Kamiyama and the story of Helm Hammerhand, the king of Rohan who protected his kingdom so epically they named the horn at Helm's Deep after him. Brian Cox voices the king, and Miranda Otto returns to provide narration in her role as Éowyn from the Lord of the Rings films. The first Tolkien adaptations were also animated, so let's see how this return to the medium pans out for Middle-earth fans. Also hitting theaters on December 13th is Kraven the Hunter. J.C. Chandor's R-rated film about the Spider-Man villain was delayed an entire year during the actor strike back in 2023, after initially being on the release schedule for January 2023. It was actually shot 2 years ago, with Aaron Taylor Johnson taking on the role of Kraven and Russell Crowe playing his cold and calculating father. Ariana DeBose also appears as Calypso, Kraven's love interest, and Alessandro Nivola plays the Rhino. Sony's recent live-action track record when it comes to Spider-Man stories without Spider-Man on board hasn't been that great, but this can't be as bad as Morbius and Madam Web, right? Right? We are now approaching Christmas, which means theaters are going to be flooded with a bunch of year-end releases, and we start on Friday, December 20th with Sonic the Hedgehog 3. Ben Schwartz's Sonic is back just in time for the holidays in his third feature film, which also features Idris Elba as Knuckles, Colleen O'Shaughnessy as Tails, and Keanu Reeves as Sonic's new nemesis, Shadow the Hedgehog, with Jim Carrey also returning as Dr. Robotnik. This seems like the most Sonic-y Sonic film yet, which might be good timing since 90s era video game movies have been printing money lately, and it should be fine as long as it avoids a crossover with Borderlands. Also on December 20th, going head-to-head with Sonic, is Disney's prequel to 2019's Lion King remake called Mufasa: The Lion King. This movie's directed by Barry Jenkins, with writer Jeff Nathanson returning. Did you ever wonder what Mufasa was like as a kid? Well, Disney hopes so, because we are going deep into his past and how his feud with Scar, who was originally known as Taka, began. Aaron Pierre voices Mufasa, with Kelvin Harrison Jr. as Taka, and Mads Mikkelsen as the leader of a pride of white lions. I guess they're leaning into the whole Kimba thing at this point. Many of the voice casts from the first film are also returning, presumably in wraparound segments to set up the flashback. Also in theaters on December 20th, though assuredly not in as many theaters as Mufasa and Sonic, is a movie called Baby Girl. Director Helena Ra'in, who directed Bodies, 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 a movie that I really liked, follows that movie up with the story of a CEO played by Nicole Kidman who has a taboo affair with an intern played by Harris Dickinson. A24 is co-producing and distributing, but not much else is known about this since it won't really premiere until the fall festival circuit begins. Honestly, I'm fine to sign off on the movie just based off of Bodies, Bodies, Bodies alone. We come now to Christmas Day, and after the presents have been opened and all the eggnog has been drunk, what are you going to be heading to the theaters to see? Well, we have a few movies that are opening on December 25th that are entering an already crowded marketplace. The first is A Complete Unknown. James Mangold brings us another biopic on Christmas Day, with Timothée Chalamet playing a young Bob Dylan, just another struggling musician in New York. Elle Fanning plays his girlfriend Sylvie Russo, with Edward Norton as Pete Seeger and Boyd Holbrook as Johnny Cash. It is hard to make a serious music biopic in a post-Dewey Cox world, especially because Walk Hard was based so heavily on Walk the Line, which was directed by James Mangold. But this may provide an avenue for Timothée Chalamet to make noise yet again in the Oscar race. Some people said maybe for Dune Part 2. I think this is probably much more likely. Also opening on December 25th is Nosferatu. It's Christmas, which for Robert Eggers means that it's Halloween, apparently. He follows up The Northman with an adaptation of the classic vampire tale. Bill Skarsgård apparently didn't traumatize enough people as Pennywise and takes on the role of Count Orlok, while Nicholas Hoult is the young real estate enthusiast Thomas Hutter, Lily Rose Depp is his wife Ellen, and Willem Dafoe is Professor Albin Eberhard von Franz. What a great character name. Dafoe himself played the star of the original Nosferatu film, Max Schreck, in 2000's Shadow of the Vampire, and scored an Oscar nomination for Best Supporting Actor. Let's see if he can repeat that feat in a very different version of the same story. Finally hitting theaters on December 25th is The Fire Inside. Speaking of Oscars, Rachel Morrison, the first woman ever nominated for the Best Cinematography Oscar, makes her directorial debut with the true story of aspiring Olympic boxer Clarissa T-Rex Shields, played by Ryan Destiny. Barry Jenkins wrote the script, and the movie co-stars Brian Tyree Henry and Judy Greer. There is a lot of prestige attached to this movie, and with a Christmas Day release, it seems very clear that Amazon MGM is trying to set this up as a major Oscar contender. And wrapping out this preview is a much anticipated second season of a TV show that's hitting Netflix on December 26th. Squid Game Season 2 will be hitting the streamer on December 26th, so you can celebrate Boxing Day and prepare for New Year's Eve with the second season of the most watched show ever on Netflix. Lee Jung-jae returns for another round of the Twisted Game show, and it's setting up a third and final season, which has already been announced for 2025. Squid Game Season 2 asks a couple of interesting questions. Number one, can Netflix capture that same lightning in a bottle twice? And number two, will this be more or less cutthroat than Beast Games? And that's the end of my list for 2024, although there is a lot more. What do you think? What are you most excited about on this list? Is there anything I didn't mention that you are excited to see? Let me know down in the comments below. And as always, thanks for spending part of your day here with me. And stay tuned right here to the channel. I'll be back very soon with more box office, movie news, reviews, and more. Until next time, stay safe, and I'll see you then.